Texas black clay soil. Looks good, but is it? Not according to the soil test. I did a soil test because I kept wondering, why am I having so many problems trying to get good crops of vegetables? So I bought the $5 soil test kit. I used it, and boom. Very high alkaline, very low nitrogen, very high in phosphorus and potash. Typical. This is very typical for this area, DFW area, for Texas, anywhere where there's the Texas black soil. I recommend you do the kit. It's pretty cheap, except you definitely want to use distilled water, because another thing I discovered was that the city water is alkaline, 8.1. And everybody's water in this area, city water is probably going to be in the 8 range. And if you have well water, it could very well be worse. The problem here is, well, low nitrogen, but that's fairly easy to fix. pH, very difficult to fix. You want your soil to be somewhere in the 6 to 6.5 range for best results. We're in the 8 range. And this is a logarithmic scale, which means 7 is 10 times more alkaline than 6, and 8 is 10 times more alkaline than 7. So that's a long way to go. And even worse, you can do another soil test for practically nothing. Just get a little soil, put it in a cup, a little dry soil. Put in a little bit of vinegar. And what that does is, you don't want to put a lot in there, just a little bit to get it just moistened. You can see it fizzing. I don't know if you can hear it. If you listen really close, you can hear it hissing. That's lime. That's free lime that's just mixed in with the soil. And when you have free lime in your soil, it becomes very, very, very difficult to move that pH. So, what can you do? One thing you can do is add some nitrogen. And a lot of people will tell you that that's the best you can do. The gentleman who sold me some cottonseed meal said that trying to lower your pH is basically an exercise in futility. You basically got the soil that you got, you add your nitrogen, you add your compost, and you do the best you can. Well, I did some research, and there are certain things you can do. One thing you could do is, like the gentleman said, add a lot of compost. This is cotton burr compost, and this is supposed to be really good. It has a lot of nitrogen already built into it, so when you add it, usually when you add like a regular compost, or something like these dried leaves, as these try to decompose in your soil, they use up nitrogen. They need nitrogen for the bacteria to digest this. And since the soil is so low in nitrogen, unless you add extra nitrogen into it, these will just sit in your soil and not decompose, or it takes a really long time. This stuff is supposed to have a lot of nitrogen built in, and it's supposed to be very acidic. So you're taking care of two things at once. You're adding your nitrogen, and you're doing something to acidify the soil. Now, what I did about 2 weeks ago, is I added this, and this is cottonseed meal. cottonseed meal, and this is supposed to be like a 1200 fertilizer. Now, when you look at fertilizers, it'll have 3 numbers on it, because the first number will be nitrogen, second number will be phosphorus, and the third number will be potash. You do not want to add more phosphorus and potash into this soil. It's already very high, and you can actually make your soil toxic to plants if you add too much of these. So try to get 00 and then whatever number for the nitrogen. So this is supposed to be around the 1200. And what I did 2 weeks ago was I put this in, and then I mixed it in with the shredded leaves. And as you can see, I got some decent decomposition of these leaves in there. Now it's probably still in the 8 range as far as pH is concerned. So there are other avenues of attack, and one of them is iron. This is a product called Copperus. It's a combination of iron and sulfur. Now, when your soil has such high alkalinity, your plants can't get enough iron or calcium. The alkalinity sort of binds those nutrients into the soil that the plants can't access it. By adding some extra, not only are you trying to lower that pH, you're adding the iron and sulfur that the plants need to survive anyway. So I'm going to add this. There's other products. There's this product, which is just sulfur, fast-acting sulfur. And what this is, it's calcium and sulfur. 11% calcium, 50% sulfur. And what this does is, what the sulfur does is you put it in the soil, and the bacteria utilize it and excrete acid. And over time, and we're talking many months, even into the years, you keep adding the sulfur into the soil, and it will gradually, over time, acidify the soil. And the same thing with the Copperus, because Copperus is sulfur and iron. Now, with the calcium in this particular product, will theoretically help prevent the blossom end rot that I had such a huge issue with this season. And you have to be careful, because there's a lot of things with nitrogen in it, like, say, bone meal. Now, I use this to side dress my tomatoes and peppers, and it seemed to work okay. But if you look at the back of it, what's it got? 010. That's phosphate. You don't want to add more phosphate to your soil. A better idea would have been to use blood meal. Now, blood meal is all nitrogen, and it's 00 for the phosphate and the potash. I would not recommend using bone meal, because you already have way too much phosphorus in your soil. So I think with the combination, I'm going to use the sulfur, I'm going to use the iron, I'm going to use the compost, cottonseed burr compost. I've already added the cottonseed meal and the shredded leaves. And that's basically all you can do, but you got to keep doing it over and over and over and over. Every season you got to add your sulfur, your iron, you got to use your compost. And what's going to happen is that, as you can see, I've already been adding to this bed, and it just keeps getting higher and higher because you're adding more and more things to the soil. So you want to look into getting some raised beds. I think next season I'm going to make a just a couple big raised beds for, and then amend that soil and for a long term. And we're talking 3, 4, 5 years to maybe push this alkalinity down. I don't think you're ever going to get it down to here. You might be able, through hard work and expense, get it down to 7. And this stuff is like this iron was like $18. That bag of sulfur, that's a 15-pound bag of the copperas. The bag of sulfur was $22 for a 20-pound bag. I think I paid $8 or $9 for this cottonseed meal. I think I paid the same for the cotton burr compost. This stuff starts adding up fast, and the more area you have, the more it's going to cost you. But if you want to get your soil right and get some good harvests and potentially make that back as far as fresh produce is concerned, there's really not too much you can do. The least expensive way would be just to do what that gentleman at the feed store said. Forget all about the alkalinity and just keep adding the nitrogen, and you'll probably get decent harvests that way. Like I said, this 50-pound bag was like $9. You could probably use this bag for a whole season if you have 100 square feet or less, and just work it that way. But of course, shredded leaves are free. Many cities already have these leaves already pre-composted for you. You can go that route. I would definitely do a mix, because adding this not only adds nitrogen when it's finished decomposing, but it also breaks up that soil, that clay soil, and it makes it more less dense, holds more water, and gives the roots access to the minerals in the soil. So that's my soil. Your soil, if you're in this area, DFW area, it's going to look like this. And those are different ways your different options which you can do to fix it.